Welcome to Unwinding with Support Group, a mental health podcast by licensed professionals where we discuss mental health topics from a real world perspective, all while having a drink. So hang out, have some laughs, enjoy the ride, and maybe learn a bit. Welcome to another episode of Unwinding with a Support Group. As usual, I'm Arvin and I am an LPC. Today I have Gatorade. In case you're wondering, it's the light blue kind because, only the police know the names of actual Gatorades, and I am not one. But today with me, I have Dave Mowry. Dave is a best-selling author of the book, Oh My God, That's Me. He also does stand-up comedy and teaches others how to do stand-up as well, using their mental health journey. So we're excited to learn a little bit more about that. But he's also a peer support specialist. So Dave kind of does a plethora of different things. And so welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Thank you. So also, what do you have to drink with you today?
I have a glass of Oregon Pinot Noir.
Perfect. Sounds
I know
delicious.
it's really good. It's early here, so I'll do a little sipping, then save it for later.
Sounds like a plan. So I
Save it for
appreciate
10 o'clock, or maybe 8
uh,
o'clock. It's 7 o'clock here, so yeah, I'll save it for at least an hour.
we'll see what happens, see how it goes.
Oh yeah, it may be gone by the time we're done talking. I don't know. We'll see.
Uh, So, all right. So let me start with before you got into all the things I just mentioned, you were a successful businessman. Can you tell us a little bit about what transitioned you from that into everything else in all the things that you got going on now?
Yeah, and I'll give you the highlighted version. Successful businessman. We seemed to have it all. I wasn't rich. We weren't rich, but we had a nice house, good family, friends, comfortably financially, pretty much debt free, and owned businesses. And then in 1996, I had a breakdown from my undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Uh, I was driving down the freeway between businesses and my mind racing, high stress situation, and my mind just snapped. I could feel it. It was like an electric shock, a small electric shock in my brain, and and my muscles in my face went slack. My vision went blurry. Everything just slowed down, and it was everything I could do just to get home and get in bed. And that was the beginning of my 14 lost years, dark days where I couldn't work, where I could barely function. So I went through that period and then very slowly, kept trying to come out of it, kept trying. And after about 14 years, I got involved with NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. And they brought in a comic who teaches stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness. And when I was in the psych unit, I came up with some jokes. So I thought, I'm funny. I can do that. It must have been a hypomanic period. So I thought I can do that. And I took the class, and it turned out I could do that. And my jokes were funny. And so I ended up writing jokes for other people in the class. And afterwards, they wanted to keep going and have another class. And I started teaching. So uh, started teaching stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness. The comedy changed everything for me. Um, Before comedy, I'd be driving down the street. My anxiety was terrible. It was just this overwhelming sense of dread. And I'd hear a song on the radio and it'd take me back to that dark place. And I'd have a panic attack. I'd just go back to that dark place and have a panic attack. And when I took comedy class, part of it was looking for humor in your experiences. The more challenges you've had, the more material you have for humor. And I had lots of material, so I started looking for the humor in my dark days. So when I heard that song and it triggered me, I said, okay, where can I find the humor in that? Changed everything. And I started, I told wrote jokes about my experiences and not talking them down or self-deprecating or anything, just very honest, very true. And slowly recovered.
Yeah.
Um, I saw the same transformation happen in the stand-up comedy classes that happened to me, and it was, OMG, that's me. You're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now. And so I progressed through that, got a little better, became a peer support specialist, started working at NAMI, and now I'm ED at a NAMI affiliate here in the Portland, Oregon area.
So that's really awesome. Really, really important, I think, for people, especially with bipolar, to know like there's another side, or anybody with any mental health struggles, to know that they're finding the thing that helps you. And comedy is always humor. Humor is a big part
Oh,
of
yeah.
lots of things, right? Um, a lot of my clients will tell you, I have a saying, and I even did it on the episode we did on trauma, that there are two kinds of people with trauma: those people who find it funny and those who haven't gotten there yet.
That's great. Can I borrow that one?
You
I'll try
sure
to do it on
can.
stage, but yeah, that's a great one. That's a
You
great one.
sure can.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so can you tell us a little bit more about how you find humor where most people find pain and loss?
Yeah, it's really important to be in a place where you're completely honest and open with yourself. And like if you're in a group setting, to be honest and open with everybody, and you kind of, um, find a challenging thing. Like with me, for anxiety was really bad. So I'd say, okay, anxiety, and then I'd write out my experiences with anxiety. I just, not too long, but just write the highlights and things, and identify places for humor. I'd see places for humor in it, and so then I'd follow that and come up with a setup and a punchline, and that part was pretty. Um, it was easier to do that than to identify the places for the humor. But looking for the humor and then identifying the places and then writing a joke uh, about that. And so the first part is of the joke is, true. The setup is true. It's a true experience and whatnot. And then the punchline is where you get creative and you have fun, and that's where people a joke, a punchline, you go through and you write, or a setup, you write a setup, like uh, one of the ways my anxiety manifested itself was if I went into a public restroom and anybody else was in there, I couldn't go. I just couldn't go. I was just so anxious and felt like I was being stared at and all that. Um, so that was happening. I'd go outside and wait for 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes or a half hour till nobody was in there, and I'd go in and go. And then the other day last week, Heather and I went to a movie, and after the movie, I went out and went into the restroom, and there were other people there, and I went up and went. And at that point, I realized how far I'd come. And I stepped back from the urinal and I went, yes, yes, yes. Everybody in the restroom looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, no, not anymore.
That's awesome.
So that's one of the jokes. And the first part is completely true. It was awful. It was awful. But
Yeah.
obviously, the second part, I didn't do all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's fun. That's
Yeah.
fun.
No. No, that is like no, and that is a like situations like that, right? Where that is fun, right? To even envision, right? The mental, yes, yes, yes,
Oh
in a
yeah,
public setting, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah. And I mean, I can go into a restaurant and go, now it is, and sometimes I feel like standing back and yelling, yes, yes, yes. So,
Yeah,
um, that's yeah, yeah. That's one of the milestones in my recovery.
no, that's cool. I'm sure, like as we're going through and people who are listening, they when they listen to you talk about teaching, stand up to folks with mental illness, and so they have a thought of like what that might look like. Can you tell us what that actually is versus like what people might envision teaching stand up might be?
Sure. People have this vision, and oftentimes it's part of the stigma that, people with a mental illness are um, incapable and I don't know, unable to do these things, and that's not true. People with mental illness mostly are just regular folks, and they just have a mental health challenge. So, the vision people have sometimes is me trying to teach comedy to people that should be in a state hospital. Which is an aside, I did teach a stand-up comedy class in the state hospital to people that were had committed crimes and were there except for insanity. And so I can say that I taught stand-up comedy to the criminally insane. And
Not everybody can say that.
no, I know that's yeah, that's pretty unique. So people see that, people think that, but people with mental illness are capable, and what it takes is being, I've had people come in that have been suicidal and truly suicidal. Molly, for an example, her mom brought her in, and Molly was a doctor, and she was going through her residency, and she had to give it up because of her mental illness. And so she lost everything. All she wanted to do was be a doctor, go home to her hometown and be the town doctor. And she lost it all. She was suicidal, and she came to class. Her mom brought her, and we started looking for the humor in her experiences. And here's Molly. She's depressed and she's suicidal, but she's smart and she's able and she's all these other things. So we found humor in Molly's story, and one of her jokes is that little did she know going through med school that the MD would stand for manic depressive. I
Okay,
know.
that's funny.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah, exactly. So, and our, the comedy we perform, and the comedy's been described as it's sharp, um, it's intelligent, and it's laugh out loud funny because we don't do just easy silly jokes. I've got some dad jokes that I tell, but we don't do just easy silly jokes. We they're smart and they're thoughtful, and we don't make fun of ourselves. We find situations and we tell a story about ourselves, a little bit about ourselves, but we find the humor in it, and it's not, we're not making fun of ourselves or anybody else. And
No, it's
I only
very
had one
real.
person after a show. I only had one person come up to me, and most of the people that come up, lots of people come up to after shows and say, that was great. That was great. There's humor. I laughed, and I laughed like I haven't laughed before. And you're telling my story. And I only had one person come up after a show, and after we've done multiple shows, and say something that you shouldn't tell that joke. It might be triggering. And the people that think it might be triggering are the people that are caregivers and providers. Because the people that live with a mental illness don't get triggered by a joke, and they don't get triggered by the word. Um, but hearing that the weather is bipolar, or, I mean, we're stronger than that. And it's kind of stigmatizing to say that we get triggered by somebody talking about the weather or using a term when, you know, we're capable, we're able, we aren't fragile, you know, we aren't fragile.
Yeah. No. I think terms like that are dismissive of how like debilitating like mental illness can be. And I think that's like the rough part of saying things like that. But to trigger, no, I don't think I agree with you.
Yeah. And it depends on the setting. If
Yeah.
I mean, if you're sitting there in a therapy session with somebody and you're talking about the weather being, but
Right.
yeah, not not good, not good.
Yeah, exactly. But no. I think humor, well, humor is such a huge part and such a big deal. It's healing in itself. Laughing is healing. And I probably am going to take a giant guess here and say the reason people resonate with your shows and what you're doing so much is because it's real and honest, and it tells stories. It tells truths that they've experienced or they know someone who's experienced, and it tells it from an honest place and realizes like, yeah, like there is another side to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it helps shatter the stigma because here are these 6 or 8 people up on stage, and it takes courage to get up on stage. It takes courage to tell your story one joke at a time, and uh, they do it so they're brave, and it helps shatter the stigma that people with a mental illness are fragile and incapable, and you know the stigma that some people have, and family members love it. People with mental illness, they love it because, yeah, they've been there, and then they can laugh about the situations.
And
So
they've always known they're funnier than everybody else.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, people just haven't got there yet.
Exactly. They're like, listen, I've been
That
through
goes
some
with
things.
your,
I
yeah,
know I'm funnier than the rest of you.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and it's been interesting, the teaching and the transformation, and seeing people come to class the first time and being, having their challenges and being in the middle of their challenges, and then going through the class, and by the end of the class, feeling good about themselves and enjoying their jokes, and then getting up on stage. And some people come to class and say, I'm gonna go through the class and I want to do all that, but I'm not going to perform. I'm not going to get up on stage. And I say, okay, no problem. You don't have to. If you want to, you can. But if you don't, that's fine. Um, but we go through the class and we write jokes and tell our stories. And by the end, they like their jokes and they want to tell them. So they get up on stage and they perform. And the first thing they say when they come off stage is, "When can I do it again?"
That
Because
is so awesome.
it's so healing. I mean, it truly is healing to get up there and tell your story and do it with humor and have people laugh at your jokes, and relate to what you're saying, and accept you for who you are. You know,
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's really cool. I wish I could teach more classes and reach more people.
it is so cool. Tell us about the time that you were sitting on the park bench,
Uh,
when you were like considering suicide, and how that is now your favorite joke.
hmm. Uh, well, when things were dark, um, and you know, the depression was so deep and so dark, and I'm sure um, but unless you've been in that deep darkness, with that anxiety and overwhelming sense of dread and loss and worthlessness, I mean, I'm not sure if it's true, but I think there's situational depression, which people can have from the loss of a loved one or loss of a job or different things. There are people can be depressed on a particular day, but um, clinical depression is, it's deep and it's severe. And so anyway, I was in that place, and I went out to a park that's not, oh, it's a few miles from my house, and there was a stream, and I sat on the picnic table with a gun in my hand, a gun in my lap, and I was watching the sun. I can see it. The sun was glinting off the water, and I sat there and sat there and sat there. Um, and I didn't, I didn't. It came to my mind that, yeah, I'd solve my problems and my pain would be gone, but the pain would live on with my family. And my dad died by suicide, and what it did, it made it an option. It didn't make
Yeah.
me think I'm going to do it. It just made it as an option. So just about everybody in the classes that I work with has had suicidal ideation at some point, and they don't do it and they don't follow through. But just everybody has a suicidal ideation. So if there's a situation where it's an option, really an option, and you've gotten over that stigma of it, then you're more likely to do it. But anyway, so I didn't do it, but I have a gentle suicide joke. So the suicide joke is based in truth because I was truly suicidal, you know. But my joke goes like, during the dark days on one particularly bad day, I decided to end it all. So I went up into the bathroom and I took a bunch of pills. Afterwards, I called my wife for help. She said there are more pills under the sink.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
Little dark, but it's gentle, a gentle
Okay,
suicide joke,
that's funny. That's
And
funny.
I had a fella, his parents, he was an adult. His parents brought him in, he's suicidal, and he attempted suicide. And so I was working at NAMI as a peer support specialist, and they came in, and uh, we were like, they found us as their last option, which was often the case. People found us as their last option and hope. Parents brought him in, the three of us sat around, and he didn't say anything. He just sat there morose, and we talked. And then I had the parents step out in the waiting room, and he and I talked. And then suicide came up, and we talked. And then I told him the suicide joke, and he laughed, and we laughed, and we laughed and laughed and laughed. And his whole demeanor changed, completely changed. And when we went out of the room, instead of being morose, he was talkative and he felt good and all that kind of stuff. And um, I had him promise to come back the next day, and I promised to come back the next day and the next day, and we got through it. And he told me, when he thinks about suicide, when he has that ideation, he thinks of that joke, and it takes the edge off, and he just moves on. There's another suicide joke. I've got a guy from the Oregon State Hospital. He was in the hospital and he was uh, suicidal and constantly obsessed about suicide, just constantly obsessed about it. And so we came up with a joke for him. It was, my suicidal ideation is getting better. Now, when I see myself jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, I'm wearing a floaty. So he's doing better.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I know. So, and people say, okay, you can't talk about suicide, and people need to talk about suicide. If they're feeling
I
suicidal, they need to. And if they're in that dark place, and you can find a joke about it, humor in it, it's so healing.
I
It's truly
agree.
healing.
It's the misconception that talking about it makes it worse.
Yeah,
Talking about it doesn't. Talking about it actually helps. Um, it doesn't like spread that way. Like talking about it doesn't like it's not contagious. Um, but really just being able to recognize like if we don't talk about it, that's when things get worse
yeah,
because
yeah,
then you bottle it
yeah,
up.
yeah. You're holding it in, you're bottling it up, and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Especially if if it's an option and you don't have to get over that part of it, that's just, uh, there are different steps to getting past and getting to the act itself. But if it's an option, you get there quicker, and if it's not an option, that's another stop along the way where you can, get out of it.
for sure. Mm. My favorite one is always live, laugh, toaster, Beth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I tell people, and one of my messages is, we live with mental health challenges, and they're bad, and it can be awful. But it's not always going to be the darkest day. It's not always going to be the hardest time. And suicide is, a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah,
And it is going to get better. It is going to
it
get better.
does. It does. And I agree. Like it's a very serious thing that if we don't talk about, then people don't get the help they need.
Yeah,
And if you don't get the help you need, then really then you can't joke about it at the other end of it.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
is also part of it.
yeah,
So
yeah. And
yeah.
you humanize yourself, when you can find humor. You humanize yourself when you can find the humor in your ideations.
Yeah, for sure.
And it could be anxiety, it could be mania, it could be, you know, anything. I've
Yeah.
got a when for a long, long time, even after my 14 last years, I wouldn't know who was going to wake up in the morning, the manic me or the depressed me. And um, but one of the ways, after a while, one of the ways I could tell which me was, when I was depressed, I spent all uh, day trying to get out of bed. And when I was manic, I spent all day trying to get my wife into
Yeah.
bed.
Yep. There you
There you go.
go.
There you go. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. What about teaching, learning, teaching, performing, stand up comedy changed your life?
It helped me find more humor in my own life. I see the transformation that happens in other people that take the class. And it's a special gift, I think, that's given to me by the people that take the class and do have the transformation, because I can feel good about it, and I can think I was part of that, and I did something that benefited somebody. One of the things I say to my kids and said to my kids was, every day when they left for school, do something nice for somebody today. Um, and so it's doing something nice for somebody, and yeah, it's giving back. It's paying it forward.
What would you say right now to anyone who's facing any hardship right now?
I think it does get better. you know, we spiral into our I could keep calling them dark days. And I had 14 lost years in my dark days, and we were homeless with the family for 18 months and all sorts of things. Um, but it does get better, and it might get better slowly, but it does get better. I think one of the things that helped me was I decided I wasn't going to get stuck. Um, this is where I'm at. And so I can accept, it took me a long time to, mostly I was pissed off that I had my mental illness, but I could accept that I had a mental illness, but I never resigned myself to this is the way it's always going to be. I just kept trying. I just kept trying. And maybe that trying looked like getting out of bed, or maybe that trying looked like uh, getting into the shower, which um, truly, when people are depressed and seriously depressed, taking a shower is like the last thing that they can do. It's everything they can do. It was everything I could do I slept in my clothes for months because it was just too much to take off my clothes to go to bed and to get up and put them on in the morning. And to take a shower is overwhelming. And so I went months without taking a shower. Uh, and I tell a joke about that, or I talk about that. I've got an article in the book about that, um, or a chapter in the book about that, and And the most common response is, OMG, that's me. You're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now. And then they tell me they haven't showered for 6 weeks. And, we start bantering back and forth about who's been unable to shower. And it's a real thing that people in deep depression it's too much. Um, and then get up. If I could get out of bed, I'd sit on the couch and I'd sit in the same place, and after a while, I'd sit in a different spot on the couch, and
Hmm.
just little victories like that. Um, Sometimes I'd sit on the couch, and it was everything I could do just to hold it together, just to be, you know, just just to be. So it does get better. You can come out the other side. You can accept your mental illness. You can be pissed off about it. It still pisses me off because I had, essentially everything. I lost everything because of it. But I can accept it, and the things just keep getting better day by day, week by week, just a little bit at a time. And don't get stuck. One of my big things was I was never going to get stuck, so I just wouldn't get stuck. And that's part of, sitting in a different spot on the couch or sitting in a different chair, or I'd take my medicine left to right as the bottles were on the counter in front of me, and then sometimes I'd take them right to left. Sometimes I'd go to the middle and take the middle pill first, just tiny, tiny, tiny things, so I didn't get stuck.
Yeah, breaking up that so it wasn't just the same blah.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, just not getting stuck. It wasn't the same. It was me trying, and I tried. I kept trying. I failed. I tried to work. Um, I got hired as a manager trainee at Starbucks and lasted a week because of the anxiety and
Hmm.
I just couldn't. I mean, I tried and I couldn't, and I tried and I couldn't. I went back to Portland State to get my degree, and that was probably the hardest thing I ever did because every time um, I'd sit in the class. I'd sit in the back right corner so that nobody was behind me. Nobody was beside me on the right. There was only somebody in the back of my head in front of me. The only place somebody was to my left, and I never looked to my left. And I was just sat there and was invisible and just invisible. And we'd break out into small groups. And as soon as we did that, I'd have a panic attack and I'd have to escape and go to the bathroom, sit in the stall, and I'd sweat and have a panic attack. And I'd just sit there until the class was over. Uh, and that happened often enough that, yeah, but I didn't give up. I just kept trying. And, that was part of my recovery. Yeah, it's taken me back to the sad, sad, hard places. But I think that's important because people need to know, again, they're not alone, and people can relate to those deep, dark places.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the, oh my God, that's me. What motivated you to write the book?
Well, it's OMG, that's me. Subtitled Bipolar Disorder, Depression, Anxiety, Panic Attacks, and More. And when I got asked to blog for bphope.com, which is BP stands for bipolar, but they've got a magazine, but it's bphope.com. Great blog, big site with lots of following, and it's huge. Anyway, I got asked to blog for them, and so I started blogging. And the blog posts would be, I'd take my situations with anxiety or a panic attack or whatever, and I'd go back to that place and I'd write about it as if it was happening. So I was telling stories, and most of the blog posts were 3 steps to getting through the day or 5 steps to this, how to. And mine were just telling stories about what it was truly like to live with a mental illness. And they've been read by over 1 million people, with the most common comment being, OMG, that's me, you're telling my story. So I took the 26 of the most popular blog posts and compiled them in my book. Um, and usually when you self-publish, you sell, maybe 50 books to family and friends. And I've sold over 22,000 copies, and been a bestseller in the mental health section for on Amazon, and it just stays there because people can relate to it, and it's different. So that's what motivated me, the response from all the blog posts, and then just trying to reach a different audience and to reach more people.
Awesome. You're on, oh my God, 3 now?
Well, actually, yeah, we pulled two. So we've got OMG, that's me three, and are revising OMG three me because that's about the comedy classes and the transformation of the people. And so we're retitling that, and it's going to be out in May. The paperback's going to be out in Kindle, and then the audiobook in June. But it's Healing with Humor, which
Nice.
says actually says what the book is about. And instead of OMG, that's me three, which says, yeah, nothing about it. So Healing with Humor, and it's a really good book. And the audiobook is awesome because what we're able to do is splice in bits of the comedians on stage telling their jokes,
That's gonna be cool.
and the audience reaction, the response to the audiobook. I'd recommend the audiobook when it comes out. It's um, you can read a joke in a book, and that's great and chuckle. But if you hear somebody on stage telling their story through humor, uh, you laugh with them, and it's a totally different thing. So, yeah, the audiobook is truly amazing. I can't wait for it to get out. And I never did promote OMG. That's me. It just grew and grew and grew by itself, and with reviews. But OMG, or Healing with Humor, I'm going to spend time promoting it and getting it out. It's a really good book, well written, and the audiobook's great, and I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Sounds great.
And Molly, like I told you, Molly, who was the doctor and lost it all, she's chapter six. So
Awesome. That'll be
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So perfect. Um, Anything that you would like the audience to know about, like if they want to get into telling their stories through humor, anything that they should know?
I think you write about the story, and you don't try to be funny. You write about it. You write about find a situation. You don't go chronologically, and I did this and I did this and I got that and then I did this. But if you're in a situation and you lost a job, or you're in a situation and um, your wife left you, or you're in a situation and you fell into a depression and couldn't shower. You write about that. And it doesn't have to be, don't write a book, but write 600 words or 800 words, just being completely honest. And then go back at it and look for places for humor. And there are places for humor within your story. And so you know, first write it out and do it by hand. You can be more creative when you write by hand, and then when you tell your story, that 600 words, that's when you go back and you say, okay, where can I find the humor in that? And there's always spots for humor, and we identify that. And then once you do that, then you get a setup and a punchline, and the setup is the true part, you know and then the punchline is just have a blast.
Hmm.
You come up with the true part, the setup, and then you come up with um like I've got a silly joke about medication and side effects, but you write about medication and side effects, and how much it irritates you, or you're tired of whatever. And then you go back and you look, the expectation is you take medication and you have side effects. Um, and you gain weight. So that's the obvious side effect, but you look for different and creative things. You get a little silly and you start writing down silly things. You write opposite things, then pretty soon you've got a setup and a punchline. like with me, having mental illness is not all bad. It's kind of like being in an exclusive club. We even have our own handshake. So yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's silly, right? It's silly, but it's fun, and
Yeah, but it's funny.
it's fun and it's funny. And so when you start finding those silly little things, those fun things, and you know, it's healing. And don't expect other people to laugh at your jokes. Write jokes that you think are funny, and there's a time and a place to tell them. And don't rely on somebody else to think it's funny or to encourage you or anything else because you don't and you don't need to rely on that. You did it. It's funny. If it's funny to you, that's good, and you can tell yourself that same joke over and over and over.
Perfect. All right. And if the people listening want to reach you, how do they find you?
You can go to davemowry.com, and it's a newer website, but it's got the basic information on it and contact. I'll give you my email address. I always reply to the emails, whether it's just a chat or more serious situation. And that's Dave Mowry, the number two at gmail.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. I think, I've been I got discovered by the podcast community. And so I've been doing a lot of podcast guesting, and I'm starting to post those. And I'll send those out via LinkedIn and on Facebook. And so you can find me there as well. And I noticed you've got a Substack.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I've got a Substack page too. So you and I can, I'll reach out to you so we can co-promote. I don't know if that's the right term, but and I've got,
Perfect.
I think 94 subscribers, and each one's a little victory.
Nice.
You
That's how
know?
I feel. Substack is a unique place. You're just like, I gotta post in.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That 10 becomes 12, and then you get 18. And, the posts you do on Substack, I mean, they stay there. They stay there for forever. And
Yeah.
so, the 92nd person is going back and reading the post that you wrote, 6 months before. Um, and for me and for you, I'm sure too, just knowing you and seeing your personality, you add humor to it, and people, it's not dry, it's not clinical,
Yeah.
um, and so people read it, and they'll tell people about it, and like I said, you and I'll reach out to you, and we can cross promote or do whatever it's called on
Perfect.
Substack, and
Awesome.
and I'll post this to my social media, and um, yeah, if you'd send me the raw footage or edited, whatever, I'll get it up on my website too.
Awesome. Will do.
So yeah, those are places. Go to Amazon. I forgot Amazon.com. If somebody wants to know they're not alone with their mental health challenges, OMG, that's me. If you want a family member to know what you're truly going through, it's OMG, that's me. And people tell me, I gave this to my mom and she finally understands.
Mhm.
You're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now. Um, yeah, it makes a difference in people's lives. And I'd recommend it. I recommend it for counselors, therapists, because we can learn so much in books and classes and internships and residencies and all that. But in the books, what it's truly like to know what somebody you're working with, who you're working with, need to know what they're going through, to read, OMG, that's me. Just truly to understand what people are going through.
Yeah, that's important too. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Like
So
the lived
Amazon.com.
experiences matter.
Oh yeah. And telling stories when you know I'm able to tell stories, go back to those places and relive those experiences and tell stories. and stories, they're powerful and they
Yeah.
make a difference. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, Dave, I appreciate you being here with me today and sharing your story and your journey and everything that you're doing in just the mental health space and helping other people kind of heal in their way. Because I do believe humor is so powerful.
truly, truly.
So, as for you guys, thanks for hanging out. So give us a like, a follow, a share, share with your friends, your enemies, keep them guessing. You know how we do around here. If you know anybody who might benefit from this, or you just, again, it's your enemy. We don't, you know how we do. Keep them guessing. But anyways, thanks for hanging out today. Thanks for listening to another episode of Unwinding with Support Group. Follow us on Substack. Give us a like, a follow. Give us a comment. Tell us what you hated, what you like, what you want us to talk about next. Let everybody know where they can find us too. But thanks for hanging out with us once again.